My guest, very special man, Imam Rauf, he's often known as, I suppose, the man behind the Ground Zero Mosque. But I think that is unfair. He has many years, decades of work within the Islamic community and working as a public figure. His book, which I have here, Moving the Mountain, Beyond Ground Zero to a New Vision of Islam in America. And he joins us now from New York City. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. Now, moving the mountain, what does that mean? What is the mountain and where do you want to move it to?
Well, the mountain there's a mountain of mistrust and suspicion between many Americans who do not know about Islam, and also many Muslims in the Muslim world about America, the Americans' intention and its very large footprint in the Muslim world. So we need to move this mountain of suspicion. Mm-hmm. It's also an issue of faith. I mean, Jesus Christ said in the Bible, if you had faith in your heart, you know, the weight of this mustard seed, you could tell yonder mountain move and it'll move. So it's about the role of faith in helping us both bridge our differences and build a better future and a better relationship between America and the West and the Muslim world, both domestically and internationally. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is entirely noble, but it's very interesting. You come to the point rather readily that you mentioned a quote from Christian scripture. Tragically, in many Muslim countries today, to quote that Christian scripture in public could lead you to be beaten, arrested, even murdered.
I take issue with you, Michael. I mean, I quote Christian scripture all the time in every part of the world. Of course, when I speak to an audience, I speak to them in their own language, in their own vocabulary. And to Muslim audiences, of course, there are many. I mean, Jesus Christ is a highly respected and revered figure in the Quran. We regard him as one of our prophets. His mother Mary there's a whole chapter, the 19th chapter of the Quran called the chapter on Mary. So we do have a lot of basis which binds us in common. Yeah. The issues really that have created the conflict are really issues
of power. Sir, why then are Christians so severely... And I should give you some background. You don't know who I am. I've lived in the Middle East, and I know a little about what I speak, which is perhaps different from some of those people who have interviewed you. This is not true, what you're saying. Christians in Pakistan, for example, are routinely attacked merely for being Christian. Coptic Christians in Egypt, you know how they're often treated. We know the fear of Syrian Christians right now with the possibility that a dictator, but a secularist might fall from power. The treatment of Iraqi Christians, Christians in Sudan, the illegality of Christianity in Saudi Arabia. You may say this is a misinterpretation of Islam, but the idea that Christians can openly quote the New Testament in Muslim countries is simply untrue.
Oh, I mean, you're asking about me quoting Christianity in Muslim countries, which I have done and do. You're absolutely correct. There are many important issues like this which we need to change. Look, even Shia Muslims in Pakistan have had their mosques bombed at Friday prayers.
They were murdered. So a busload of them were murdered. Let's have a look at that clip. I know you've seen this clip many times, and I think you've probably, well, I know you've commented on it since and perhaps reversed your position, but I know many people know about this, so it would be inappropriate of me not to use it. Let's see this clip now from 60 Minutes, please.
I wouldn't say that the United States deserved what happened, but the United States policies were an accessory to the crime that happened.
Okay. You saying that we're an accessory?
Yes.
How?
Because we have been an accessory to a lot of innocent lives dying in the world. In fact, in the most direct sense, Osama bin Laden is made in the USA.
That was very shortly after thousands of people had been murdered and their families were still weeping.
That was an insensitive thing to say, and I regret having said that.
Is it true, though?
Well, look, the issue of violence in the Muslim world, we do have a very important issue in addressing extremism and violence which comes from the Muslim world. But we have to look at the causes and the root causes for it. Why is it that you know, the US is targeted far more than Canada? Not because
before we move on, we'll get to that certain valid point. But before we get there, I just want to qualify. You said it was insensitive. Understood. You wish you hadn't said it. Understood. Do you think it's true? Do you think, and by America, we can extend that to the West. We can extend that to the UK and Canada. Do you think the West is partly responsible or largely responsible for creating this sadistic, horrific hatred that so many Muslims have for Western countries and Western values?
We all have to take partial responsibility. The fact of the matter is, Michael, you know, we have a large footprint. The United States has bases in the Middle East, bases in many Muslim countries. There have been drone attacks, for example, in Pakistan, which have killed innocent people, which is why there's a lot of anger in Pakistan, let's say, towards America. It is these types of things which, unfortunately, I mean, while we understand the reasons why this happened, it creates this kind of a problem. So the question becomes, how do we solve the problem? First, we have to understand the problem and understand its causes, and then we can come to address it. But you know, if we don't have a proper understanding of the problem, we are likely to look for solutions in the wrong places.
But let's talk about the history of the Middle East here, because again, the left today and others, and I'm sure you have equal contempt for ignorance as I do, seem to misunderstand this. America wasn't involved in the Middle East till fairly late. The great empire that dominated the Islamic world was a Muslim empire, the Ottoman Empire. Until 1918, it was Turkish Muslims who controlled the entire region. The creation of the Jewish state, the rebirth of the Jewish state in 1948, America wasn't involved. It was the Soviets and the Czechs who armed Israel. In 1967, it was the French. America got involved in the 70s, really. When Muslims kill other Muslims, I remember being in Lebanon and seeing Shia Muslims drag other Shia Muslims out of their hospital beds and cut them in pieces in front of me. America was responsible? This hatred is internal, it's insular.
Of course, I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, look, there's a lot of issues which exist within the Muslim world which we have to address. I do not dispute that at all. I was talking, you were asking about the question about if the United States being involved in those. That's what I was discussing. But we have major issues. Look, the common enemy we have today is not Islam. Islam is not the enemy of the West, nor is the West the enemy of Islam in any fundamental way. The real enemy is extremism, and the kind of extremism which results in an attitude which says, if you do not believe the way I believe, you are my enemy, and your life
let me stop you there. I've heard you say this before.
This is the real battlefront, and we have to
qualify this. I agree with you, but I've heard you say this before. The enemy is extremism. No, the enemy is Islamic extremism.
Extremism in all its forms.
Well, which are the forms?
Because
which are the forms, sir? Which are the forms? Are you talking about Mormon extremism, Quaker extremism? What other religious extremism apart from Islamic extremism?
Because you see, Michael, extremism fuels itself. When you have an Ayatollah or a person in the Muslim world accusing America as being, you know, the great Satan or something like that, it arouses, it polarizes people in the West. They say, oh, Islam is a bad religion.
No.
Then you have allow me, Michael, to finish, please.
It's a straw man. No, but I asked you a question and you haven't answered me. You keep saying religious extremism. Is it Islamic extremism? Is that what we're talking about here? I'm answering you. So what happens when you have a military colonel saying Islam is an evil religion, that gets the headline in the Muslim world. One fairly junior officer. So please. And let's have a proper discussion here. Hold on. A preacher somewhere who burns the Quran. Please, a junior officer is one thing. Throughout the Islamic world, there is a hatred for the West and for Christianity that is tangible. I've been traveling to the Middle East now for 30 years. It has got worse and worse. It has little to do with America. It has a lot to do with the rebirth of Islamic extremism. Would you agree with me the danger is not religious extremism, the danger is Islamic extremism?
Islamic extremism is now the most potent form of extremism, but all extremisms have to be eliminated. I lived in the 20th century. I've seen extremism of a secular type, the extremism of what was done under Abdel Nasser, where religious voices were removed and suppressed and liquidated. This is why we have a kind of a reaction. The rise of Islamic extremism did not happen. It happened as a reaction to a kind of militancy that occurred in that part of the world against the religious voices. So the religious voices who are moderate, the moderate religious voices, have been actually overtaken by the extremist religious voices.
Very quickly, before we're out of time. I'm going to lose a satellite any moment, so if I do, forgive me, but just very quickly. Sharia law, armed jihad, Hezbollah, Hamas. These are things in the past that you have been ambivalent about at the very least. Would you condemn them now?
Look, Sharia is the law of Islam. I can't condemn the law of Islam any more than I can condemn. But any jihad which targets civilians is something that I have always condemned and will continue to condemn.
Hamas and Hezbollah? You've supported them in the past?
Any organization that attacks civilians, including Hamas and Hezbollah, that commits acts of terrorism defined as targeting innocent civilians is a terrorist group.
All right. Sir, I wish we had more time, but I appreciate what we have had. Thank you so very much indeed.
Thank you, Michael.